The morning of December 2001 began like any other, but by sunset, one of America's largest corporations would vanish. The streets of Houston buzzed with whispers. Enron, once worth $70 billion, filed for bankruptcy. The collapse was sudden, shocking, and complete. Traders stared at glowing monitors, jaws clenched, watching the stock ticker bleed red. Janice, a 36-year-old analyst, whispered, "This can't be real," as her life savings evaporated. Across the glass towers, executives locked doors, shredded documents, and braced for the storm. The fall was not slow or graceful. It was explosive, like a detonated secret finally unburied. News anchors scrambled for updates. The image of the Enron logo flickered on every screen, no longer a symbol of innovation but of infamy. Inside trading floors, fear twisted into rage. The dream had become a trap. For years, Enron had been praised as genius. Now, it was revealed as a hollow husk built on fraud. And the crash was just beginning. The shock was not limited to skyscrapers or trading terminals. Across America, Enron's collapse spread like a virus through pensions, 401(k)s, and hometown trust. Retirees in small towns cried as their life savings disappeared. Families who once praised Enron's stock gifted at birthdays now watched it die. The media called it the corporate apocalypse, but to the people, it was betrayal. Gary Thompson, 61, once an Enron plant worker in Oregon, sat silently in his living room, hands trembling. He had believed in the company. "They told us we were family," he murmured. "Now they act like we're disposable." TV broadcasts rolled endless footage, crying employees, furious shareholders, senators demanding answers. It wasn't just a business crash. It was emotional, personal. It was the betrayal of the American dream. Outside Enron's HQ, the crowd swelled, protesters shouting, employees sobbing. A generation's hope was burning in real time, and the smoke could be felt in every corner of the country. Inside the Enron headquarters, the air was thick with confusion and denial. Employees moved like ghosts, whispering rumors that shifted by the minute. Some refused to believe it. "We're too big to fall," said a young engineer as he clutched a cardboard box. Others frantically packed, stared at blank monitors, or cried silently in corners. Sent out vague emails. No clarity, no comfort. Managers avoided eye contact. The elevators dinged endlessly, doors opening to reveal no one. Security guards appeared where they never used to. Coffee machines stood untouched, the bitter aroma now a relic. People held on to hope, but there was no memo, no meeting, no farewell. Just silence and shadows. As dusk approached, one woman, Dana, typed furiously at her desk. Her screen read, 401(k), balance, 0. She stopped. She didn't cry. She just stared. The moment was surreal. This wasn't just a company falling. It was a world ending, cubicle by cubicle. Long before the public collapse, someone inside had sensed the cracks. Sharon Watkins, a senior executive in finance, began to notice patterns that didn't add up. Her instincts were sharp, honed by years in the industry. She reviewed balance sheets late into the night, heart racing with every page. The numbers lied. They had to. In the silence of her office, she wrote the first confidential memo to Ken Lay, warning of accounting irregularities. She didn't sleep that night. The next day, she passed him in the hallway. He smiled politely, said nothing. She felt invisible. What if I'm wrong, she thought. But she wasn't. Sharon stood at the edge of a truth no one wanted spoken. Her gut twisted with dread. To speak out meant war. To stay silent meant complicity. In that moment, she knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deception. And it was about to explode. When the news broke, it didn't trickle. It roared. Every major outlet ran live coverage. Reporters camped outside Enron HQ, microphones raised like torches. How could this happen? They asked again and again. Wall Street analysts stumbled on live TV. Politicians called for hearings. A CNN chyron read, "Corporate Titanic." Viewers nationwide clutched coffee cups tighter, frozen in disbelief. At homes, bars, offices, every screen played the same footage. A tower of lies collapsing in real time. Enron's sleek commercials now played like cruel jokes. "Ask why," they once said. Now, everyone did. The media storm was relentless. Helicopters circled the HQ. Former employees were hounded for quotes. The word fraud echoed from every screen. And behind every headline, every hot take, was a simple, painful truth. Trust had been broken. Irrevocably. Sharon Watkins wasn't a rebel. She was loyal, analytical, methodical. At 40, she had climbed the ladder in a man's world with quiet force. She didn't throw punches, she asked questions. In a company drunk on its own genius, she became the sober voice. Years at Arthur Andersen and Enron had made her sharp, but not cynical. She believed in accountability. When the numbers stopped making sense, she didn't flinch. "What are they hiding?" she thought, scouring spreadsheets into the early morning hours. Alone, surrounded by silence, she began stitching together a picture, one of fraud, cover-up, deceit. She could have stayed quiet. Many did. But Sharon had a conscience that roared when others whispered. She didn't seek attention. She sought truth. She knew the cost. She felt it. Still, she sent the memo. Still, she walked into Lay's office. Still, she stood up. She wasn't the hero Enron deserved. She was the one it feared. Kenneth Lay didn't start at the top, he climbed. Born poor in Missouri, son of a Baptist preacher, Lay grew up with discipline, ambition, and a burning desire to prove himself. He wasn't born into power, he created it. From PhD to oil executive, Lay learned how to charm, persuade, and control a room. His southern drawl disarmed. His business sense impressed. To Wall Street he was visionary. To politicians he was a donor. To employees he was a father figure. But behind the charisma was something colder, a man willing to overlook truth for applause. Lay knew how to play the game. He gave speeches about deregulation while quietly stacking power behind the scenes. He smiled on camera, nodded through lies, and shook hands as the ground cracked beneath him. To many, he was the American dream. But even dreams can be corrupted. And Kenneth Lay had no intention of waking up. Jeffrey Skilling wasn't just brilliant, he was explosive. Harvard MBA, razor-sharp intellect, restless ambition. He walked fast, talked fast, thought faster than most. At 38, he pitched Enron a radical idea, mark-to-market accounting. Profit, not when it's earned, but when it's imagined. Fantasy dressed as finance. And Enron said yes. Skilling created a culture of winners, driven by ego and adrenaline. He told people, "You're either a genius or you're fired." That wasn't a joke. He hired physicists, analysts, visionaries, then told them to change the world. But what he built wasn't a company. It was a confidence game. Behind the glass walls and motivational speeches was a man terrified of being ordinary. His hunger for dominance blinded him. He wasn't evil. He was desperate, to be seen, to be remembered. In the end, he was. But not for what he hoped. Andy Fastow was the numbers guy, quiet, intense, calculating. In his early 40s, with glasses and an accountant's posture, he wasn't flashy. But he was dangerous. Fastow didn't bend rules. He erased them. His creation? A web of secret entities, LJM, Raptors, and Spes. Financial ghosts designed to bury debt, hide losses, and create illusions of profit. He was the wizard behind the curtain. While Skilling preached vision, Fastow engineered deception. He moved billions with a few keystrokes. "We control perception," he told a colleague. And he meant it. But power has a price. Fasto became obsessed with control, buying properties, stashing money, watching his empire expand. In mirrors, he saw a genius. In truth, he was a fraud. And deep down, he knew it. But obsession doesn't care about consequences. It feeds. It feeds. And Andy Fasto fed it with everything he had. They weren't CEOs or traders. They were assistants, analysts, plant workers, the heartbeat of Enron. People like Maria, a 45-year-old secretary who'd worked 2 decades with pride. Or Ben, a warehouse foreman with a daughter in college. They weren't in boardrooms. But they paid the price. Their 401(k)s were tied to Enron stock. Their pensions evaporated. Managers told them everything was fine, until their cards stopped working and HR went silent. Some went home numb. Others protested. Most just stared at their bank accounts in disbelief. It wasn't just financial ruin. It was humiliation. They had believed in the company, worn the logo proudly, trusted the leaders, and now they were discarded like numbers on a balance sheet. No headlines told their stories, but their pain was real. They were collateral damage, the true victims of Enron's deception. Enron didn't just manipulate numbers, it rewrote the rules. With Jeff Skilling's mark-to-market accounting, profit became prediction. On paper, deals were declared profitable the day they were signed, even if revenue would take years or never arrive. A deal worth $100 million over 20 years? Enron booked it all on day one. It looked like genius. It was illusion. If you believe it's worth that, then it is, Skilling told his team. Analysts cheered. Stock soared. Inside the company, accountants voiced concern, but were quickly silenced or pushed aside. Everyone wanted to believe. From traders to boardrooms, projections replaced reality. This wasn't just risky. It was systemic delusion. And it worked, for a while. Earnings beat forecasts. Media called them the smartest guys in the room. But behind the curtain was a truth too terrifying to face. No profits, just projections. No value, just belief. The higher the lie climbed, the harder the fall would be. Andy Fasto was more than CFO. He was an architect of illusion. His invention, special purpose entities, or SPECs. These shadow companies weren't illegal by definition, but Enron twisted them beyond recognition. Fasto created LJM and Raptor partnerships to buy Enron's bad assets, making losses vanish from public reports. Investors never saw the rot, only polished numbers. But here's the twist. Fasto controlled both sides. He managed Enron's balance sheet and secretly ran the SPECs, raking in millions. It was a game of financial Russian roulette. It's just accounting, he'd say, laughing. Except it wasn't. It was fraud, camouflaged in complexity. Board members approved. Auditors looked away. As long as the stock rose, no one cared how. But the deeper the lie grew, the more unstable it became. And eventually, the books wouldn't balance. But for now, the illusion dazzled. While employees trusted the company, Enron's top brass cashed out. Executives sold stock by the millions, even as they urged staff to hold theirs. Lay, Skilling, Fasto. They all knew. They knew the storm was coming. But instead of warning others, they enriched themselves. Quarterly meetings were filled with optimism. The future looks brighter than ever, Lay declared, as he quietly dumped shares. Employees applauded, believing him. All while retirement funds were being obliterated in slow motion. The betrayal wasn't just strategic. It was personal. These weren't strangers. They were leaders, mentors, icons. But behind every smile was a sell order. Enron's collapse wasn't sudden. It was drained from the inside, one lie at a time. And every transaction told a story of greed dressed as genius. Enron wasn't just a corporate behemoth. It was a political machine. Kenneth Lay had friends in high places. Presidents, senators, regulators, Many owed him favors. Enron donated millions. In return, they got deregulation, tax breaks, and silence. Energy policies were written with Enron's fingerprints. Vice President Cheney met with Lay behind closed doors. Skeptics raised alarms, but their voices were drowned in campaign checks. The illusion wasn't confined to Wall Street. It extended to Washington. When California blackouts began, fingers pointed at utilities, but many whispered Enron's name. Their manipulation of energy markets, made possible by weak oversight, was devastating. Yet no one intervened. Why? Because Enron wasn't a company anymore. It was part of the system. And tearing it down would mean exposing too many truths. So the charade continued. Even as Enron crumbled, Kenneth Lay remained calm. Too calm. He appeared on camera assuring everyone, the fundamentals are strong. He smiled, nodded, deflected. Behind closed doors, he knew the truth. But denial was his shield. At town halls, employees begged for answers. Should we still hold our stock? Someone asked. Lay paused, then replied, absolutely. The room applauded. They didn't know he had already cashed out. Lay wasn't just a figurehead. He was the illusion's final face. When media pressed him, he grew colder. I'm not aware of any wrongdoing, he repeated. Again. And again. But his eyes said otherwise. He wasn't saving Enron. He was preserving his legacy. The captain never left the ship, but he did make sure his lifeboat was full. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a memo, just 7 pages. But it would ignite the fuse beneath Enron's empire. Sharon Watkins, tired of whispers and deception, sat down at her desk and wrote the truth. She outlined accounting violations, hidden debts, and the danger they posed. She warned that if exposed, Enron would implode in a wave of accounting scandals. The words were calm, measured, but lethal. She sent it directly to Kenneth Lay. And then she waited. Days passed. Nothing. Nothing. No reply. No meeting. Just silence. She had lit the match and was left to watch the fuse burn alone. Inside the executive suites, panic whispered behind polished doors. Lay forwarded the memo to Enron's law firm. They didn't fix it. They prepared to cover it. Sharon had not only seen the monster, she had named it. And now, the creature stirred. The silence was over. The truth had a witness. August 14, 21. Jeff Skilling resigned. No warning. No crisis declared. Just a press release and a calm statement. For personal reasons. Wall Street blinked. Enron employees froze. The man who built the machine was walking away. At the height of its power? Skilling's departure sent tremors through the company, but no one dared say why. Internally, some speculated burnout. Others whispered that he saw the collapse coming. But he left with millions in stock and no accountability. Lay returned as CEO, a ghost stepping back into his old skin. But the magic was gone. Skilling's exit wasn't a retreat, it was a calculated escape. He knew the walls were closing in. He had seen the numbers. The machine was buckling. So he jumped. And those left behind? They clapped, smiled, and went back to work. As if nothing had happened. As if the iceberg wasn't already in sight. By October 2001, the whispers turned to subpoenas. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission launched a formal investigation into Enron's accounting practices. Overnight, calm corporate corridors turned into legal battlegrounds. Executives ducked interviews. Lawyers replaced assistants. Office printers churned out compliance documents. The same people who once celebrated growth now deleted emails in the dark. Enron issued a statement. We welcome transparency. But behind that smile was sheer panic. Pasto was ousted quietly. Investors panicked publicly. Stock tumbled. Credit agencies downgraded Enron's rating. In just weeks, confidence evaporated. Auditors at Arthur Andersen shredded files. Literally, thousands of pages destroyed. One document fed after another into whirring teeth of industrial shredders. And with every page, the evidence vanished. Or so they thought. The regulators were coming, and Enron's fortress of fiction was about to collapse under the weight of fact. The press smelled blood. Investigative reporters, once dazzled by Enron's charm, now sharpened their pens. Bethany McLean of Fortune had asked months earlier, "How exactly does Enron make its money?" Now, the world demanded the same. Front-page headlines exploded. Fraud, House of Cards, Wall Street's darkest star. Cameras hounded Lay. Skilling hid from interviews. Fasto vanished entirely. A media hurricane tore through the carefully curated image. Slick commercials were replaced by protest signs. CNBC anchors turned skeptical. Enron's name became a punchline on late-night TV. Public opinion flipped overnight. Confidence turned into disgust. The illusion was shattered. What once stood as the model of innovation was now exposed as the embodiment of deceit. The media didn't bring Enron down, but they held up the mirror. And America didn't like what it saw. The numbers stopped pretending. Enron's stock, once worth 90 a share, dropped below $1 billion. Deals vanished. Investors fled. Banks pulled credit lines. Trading halted. And inside Enron's glass fortress, the silence became unbearable. Phones rang with no one to answer. Meetings were cancelled. Bonuses frozen. Panic gripped everyone, from executives to janitors. Every monitor flashed red. Margin calls hit fast and merciless. Even loyal employees began dumping shares. Too late. The pension funds were already bleeding out. Employees stood outside the building with cardboard boxes, like shadows of their former lives. Some cried. Others stared at the sidewalk, lost. The media kept rolling. Helicopters buzzed overhead. The collapse wasn't slow. It was a free fall. A corporate Icarus, wings of illusion melting in real time. The building still stood, but the company inside had ceased to exist. The halls of Congress echoed with rage. In February 2002, the first hearing convened. The Enron scandal was no longer corporate, it was national. Lawmakers grilled executives under oath. A long mahogany table became the stage where power faced shame. Cameras rolled, pens scribbled, flashbulbs exploded. The room buzzed with restrained fury. Senator Levin leaned in, eyes narrowed. "Who's responsible?" he asked again and again. One by one, executives evaded, denied, stumbled. They blamed market conditions, accounting standards, everyone but themselves. Ken Lay claimed ignorance. "I wasn't aware," he repeated. Skilling played clever. "I can't recall," he said with a smile. But the room saw through it. These weren't missteps, they were betrayals. Congress wasn't just seeking answers. It was staging a reckoning. The American public watched from living rooms, bar stools, and office TVs. They didn't want explanations. They wanted justice. Jeff Skilling's turn came next. He walked in like a man still clinging to his myth. Suit crisp, smile rehearsed, voice steady. But under pressure, cracks formed. When asked if he believed Enron was honest, he leaned forward and declared, "Absolutely." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Then came the confrontation. Congressman Greenwood raised a document. "Did you sign this?" he demanded. Skilling froze. His mouth opened, then closed. "I do not recall," he said again. His confidence dimmed. The facade faltered. This was no longer Wall Street. This was the truth, stripped bare. Behind him, the faces of laid-off employees stared. They weren't there for revenge. They were there to watch the unraveling. In 6 hours of testimony, Skilling gave no confession. But the performance spoke louder than words. His legend, built in boardrooms, crumbled under oath. Then came the fall. In October 2002, federal agents arrested Andrew Fastow at dawn. No press conference, no ceremony, just handcuffs and silence. The man who once moved billions in shadows was now shackled in daylight. Outside the courthouse, cameras rolled as he stepped from the black SUV, head lowered, jaw clenched. His wife watched from afar, eyes unreadable. Prosecutors charged him with fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Inside his briefcase were documents, spreadsheets, ghosts of the empire he built. Fastow pled not guilty. But privately, he bargained. He knew where the bodies were buried. He had built the graveyard. His arrest sent a signal. The illusion was over. This wasn't about market volatility. It was about crime, about greed, deception, and ego finally meeting consequence. Fastow wasn't the only villain, but he was the first to be caged. Ken Lay never admitted guilt. Even as evidence piled high, he denied responsibility. In his final public plea, he spoke with that same calm voice. "I did nothing wrong," he said, eyes steady but empty. "I loved Enron." To him, the collapse was a tragedy, not a crime. But the world saw it differently. Prosecutors painted him as a puppeteer, a man who knew and chose silence. In interviews, Lay clung to victimhood. "I lost everything too," he said. But it wasn't the same. He lost stock. Others lost lives. He had power. Others had trust. And trust was what he broke. The courtroom grew colder each time he spoke. Not because of his words, but because of what was missing. Remorse. Accountability. Truth. Ken Lay never truly faced the fire. He walked toward the end, unrepentant, still clinging to the fantasy. While executives dodged justice, former employees gathered outside the courthouse. Not to protest, to testify with their presence. Signs read, "We trusted you. Where's our retirement?" A middle-aged woman clutched her husband's framed photo. A man who had died of a heart attack after losing everything. Nearby, a laid-off technician screamed, "They lied to us!" The rage was volcanic. These weren't mobs. They were workers, parents, neighbors, people who believed in a system that betrayed them. Some yelled. Others wept. Some just stood silently, holding shredded 401k statements. The anger wasn't just about money. It was about dignity stolen, futures erased. It was about trust, the invisible contract between worker and employer, broken without apology. This wasn't just a corporate failure. It was a wound. And it still bled. The courtroom became Enron's final stage. In 2006, the trials of Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling began. The media called it the trial of the decade. Prosecutors laid bare the fraud. Balance sheets, emails, and testimonies painted a damning portrait. Skilling arrived in sharp suits, still defiant. Lay looked pale, diminished. Witness after witness exposed the deception. Former employees cried on the stand. Skilling grew combative. Lay remained distant. In May, the verdict came. Skilling, guilty on 19 counts. Lay, guilty on 6 counts. Justice at last. But fate intervened. Just weeks later, Ken Lay died of a heart attack while vacationing in Colorado. Some called it tragic. Others called it convenient. The justice system claimed victory, but the damage was done. Enron's name would never be cleared. And no sentence could return what was lost. The trial was an ending, but not a resolution. Just a reckoning delayed. The verdict didn't silence the outrage. Across America, citizens demanded reform. Never again, they chanted outside courthouses and Capitol steps. Late-night shows mocked Enron's leaders. Protesters camped outside the homes of former executives. Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, aimed at preventing future corporate fraud. But the public wasn't cheering. They were exhausted. They had lost pensions, jobs, trust. To them, laws were just paper. What they wanted was accountability, and a promise it wouldn't happen again. College students wore Enron shirts. Artists painted murals of broken piggy banks. The scandal entered classrooms, courtrooms, and coffee shops. It became folklore, a lesson taught in pain. America didn't just lose a company. It lost a part of itself, and no apology would bring it back. Enron's tower still stands, a steel and glass monument to ambition and ruin. But inside it's a different world. The walls have been repainted, the logos removed, the voices silenced. Former employees drive by in silence. Some can't look, others stare. The void Enron left wasn't just economic, it was emotional. Houston lost more than a company. It lost an identity. Restaurants near the headquarters closed. Dry cleaners vanished. Entire blocks dimmed. The city, once proud of its energy titan, grew ashamed. Enron's name became a whisper, then a warning. And yet, inside those walls, memories linger. Echoes of laughter, ambition, deception. You can paint over a logo, but you can't erase what it meant. Not fully. The building remains, but the dream it once held has turned to dust. Jeff Skilling received 24 years in prison, one of the longest white-collar sentences in U.S. history. The courtroom was quiet as the judge spoke. Skilling didn't flinch. He wore no shackles, no orange jumpsuit. Just a dark suit and thin smile. He was allowed to surrender later. He'd still live in comfort, but his legacy had shattered. Once hailed as a financial visionary, now just another cautionary tale. In prison he read books, kept quiet, and eventually bargained his sentence down. Years later, he was quietly released. No cameras. No headlines. Just a man stepping into daylight, older, grayer, forgotten. But his name remains etched in America's corporate nightmare. Not because he was the only one, but because he flew highest and fell hardest. Sharon Watkins didn't vanish. She testified. She spoke. She became the face of corporate whistleblowing. But it came at a cost. Some called her a hero. Others called her a traitor. She received threats. Her career in corporate finance was effectively over. But she carried no regret. I did what I had to do, she said. Her voice was calm, but firm. She now teaches ethics. Speaks to students. Warns them. The next Enron could be anywhere. Her office isn't lined with awards. It's lined with letters from people who felt heard for the first time. Sharon never sought fame. She sought truth. And in a world built on silence, she chose to speak. The world may forget Enron's executives, but it will remember the woman who dared to say, "This is wrong." And that, in the end, may be the legacy that matters most. Enron wasn't just a company. It was a symbol of ambition, arrogance, innovation, and illusion. It promised to change the world, and in a way, it did. It showed us how power can blind, how profit can distort, and how unchecked ego can ruin lives. Its collapse marked the end of an era, the dot-com dreams, the deregulated hope, the myth of the untouchable corporation. The logo that once stood for energy efficiency and excellence now stands for everything gone wrong. Boardrooms became war zones. Trust became a commodity. Enron's name entered our vocabulary as shorthand for fraud, for betrayal, for deception. But behind the headlines and court cases, Enron left behind a deeper question, one that still lingers. What happens when we value perception more than reality? When truth becomes optional? Enron is gone, but its shadow still stretches across the financial world. Enron's legacy didn't end in bankruptcy court. It echoed in every financial scandal that followed. WorldCom, Lehman Brothers, Bernie Madoff. Each one borrowed from the same playbook: inflate, deny, collapse. Enron taught them that appearances matter more than integrity, until they don't. It showed how ratings agencies could be bought, how auditors could be silenced, how regulators could be lulled into sleep. It taught Wall Street to ask the wrong questions. And yet, it also sparked reform. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act was born from its ashes. Whistleblowers were given platforms. Investors demanded transparency. But the lesson, like the pain, fades. Memory is short. Greed is patient. And the cycle, if left unchecked, always returns. Enron didn't destroy capitalism, but it revealed its flaws, laid them bare, and dared us to look away. Many did. Some still do. For every executive charged, there were thousands left behind. Single parents who lost pensions. Elderly couples forced out of retirement. Young professionals who never found stable ground again. Their stories didn't make headlines. They were quiet casualties. Invisible victims of corporate warfare. Ben Alvarez, once an engineer, now drove for a rideshare service. Linda Jackson, who used to lead HR, now worked part-time at a grocery store. Their resumes carried a stain. The name Enron, once a badge of pride, became a liability. They were never criminals. Just collateral. People who believed the lie because they had to. Because their lives depended on it. And when the truth surfaced, no apology came. No restitution. Only silence. Enron collapsed in headlines. But its real collapse happened quietly. In the homes, bank accounts, and broken dreams of the people who built it. The Enron scandal wasn't just a story of corporate fraud. It was a mirror. It forced America to confront the flaws in its financial system and in its values. We reward success, but rarely question how it's achieved. We idolize risk-takers, even if they gamble with lives. Enron was a wake-up call, and for a moment, it worked. For a moment, audits mattered. Ethics returned to boardrooms. Politicians vowed reform. But time moved on, and the lessons faded. Greed evolved. The actors changed. But the script remained. And so we circle back, again and again. The tragedy wasn't that Enron happened. The tragedy is that it can happen again. If we don't remember, if we don't ask questions, if we don't demand better. The wake-up call rang. But were we listening? In the end, Enron wasn't about accounting tricks or corporate malice. It was about people, and the stories they believed. The myth of endless growth. The seduction of prestige. The comfort of following orders. Easy to label villains. Harder to admit the system made them. Skilling once said, "We were just doing what the market rewarded." Maybe he was right. Maybe the market rewards illusion. Until it doesn't. In boardrooms today, you can still hear echoes of Enron. In policies. In silence. In smiles too wide to trust. But also in voices like Sharon's. In questions that refuse to go unasked. In students who study Enron not to repeat it, but to challenge what made it possible. The masters of deception are gone. But the game continues. And what we do next is the only truth that matters.